Hit it!
That's what I'm talking about.
Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Smoking big cigars. I hope you're ready for what's coming now. I'm the one, I'm the lady that will bring you down. There's a joint on the corner where the big boys play, where the whiskey's running like the rivers, but they all never come for the booze and bass. I'm the one, I'm the lady that'll rock this place. That'll rock this place. That'll rock this place. Rock this place. Rock this place. Rock this
I'm at the Aberfeldy Men's Shed this morning where U3A have been partnering with Moonee Valley to create a new program called Wednesday Woodies. So let's go and find out what it's all about.
Yeah, I like to do some handcrafting.
My background is this way. I was born among sawdust, we can say. It's something that being cabinet maker, joiner, is in the family.
You use this tray all the time at home?
Well, I'm trying to learn a bit of woodwork and use the equipment.
And I joined this, call it men's shed, in this case is U3A, the University of the Third Age, that glue us together. Glue, you see? Glue us together here in the probably more or less the same interest to say sociable with other people.
People like me know, able to teach us.
Don't put me so high just in case I commit mistake. Then how can I come back?
Even if you do the... Yes, we have come to learn skills as well, because a lot of the men here know how to use all these tools and know how to put things together and fix things, and most women don't get the opportunity to do that when they're at home. They're busy doing other things.
Measure twice, cut once.
It's nice, it's very nice, I like it.
We don't have anyone around, and I was by myself and Oscar. He wouldn't go with others, he wouldn't go and make new friends. He's a bit hesitant. So I said to them, like, you know, he's like that. He wouldn't talk to everybody. He will just sit and play with his cars and take hours and hours. He can sit by himself and he doesn't actually get involved with new activities. I had discussion with Kat.
Sometimes he struggled with routine, and it could be, and sometimes he was very stuck in routine where he just wanted the same thing, and then if something had changed, he didn't cope with that change. And at first, when I had to use Epic, I was kind of like, oh, what is this? All it was any child that I felt needed a little bit of extra support. You'd fill out some forms, do some observation on children, and then you'd get in contact with Kim, who plays a big part of it, and she's been amazing.
I oversee the rollout of our early intervention services program.
And then she told me, why don't you come on and join the meeting with Jacinta?
So I'm here to actually help the educators to work with their family.
And then I lead the meeting just as a conduit between everyone in the room, ensuring that the conversation is child focused. It's a bit of a thing to throw around, you know, that the parent is the expert on their own child. We really want to make that real and tangible for parents and for families.
Coming here is looking at the teachers and telling them my difficulties and finding the answers, all the answers. It's like making new friends. It's like the best thing.
Jacinta's at the stage of assessing Oscar and talking to Mum about whether he is school ready.
The really important thing, it's one of the things that really comes out from it, is that the families are able to identify where their child needs support.
They're the only way I feel like, you know, helping me through all this difficult time when I was by myself with Oscar. And I wouldn't, because at that time I didn't have anyone.
I know Mum's on her own here with Oscar, and you know, so that just led us to do the best we can for Oscar.
All I know is these guys are helping me. They're friends to me. Hi, my name is Meena Rani and I'm Oscar's mum.
And what's your name? Who is this?
Oscar.
Oscar! Okay, Oscar!
I'll do whatever it takes, you know, for Oscar.
High five? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Oscar.
Okay.
Oh,
Good boy. Welcome everybody to the ordinary meeting of Council for the 28th of May 2019, which is now open. A warm welcome to members of the public gallery who have joined us tonight at the Civic Centre, as well as those watching from home via live streaming. Thank you for joining us. As well as being live streamed, the recording of this meeting will also be available on our website, so attendees in the gallery are advised that their presence may be recorded. And I'd just like to ask if mobile phones could please be switched to silent mode during the meeting. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past and present. I'd also like to extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Councillors, I have received 2 apologies for tonight's meeting, one from Councillor Sypek and from Councillor Nation. So can I please have a motion that the apologies be noted? Councillor Sorais, thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Byrne, thank you. Are there any questions? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimously approved, thank you. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the ordinary meeting of Council held on Tuesday, 14th of May 2019 be confirmed? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Any questions on the minutes? No, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening? No, thank you. Councillors, do we have any presentations tonight? I don't know that we do. No. We have received 2 petitions to be tabled tonight. So, councillors, can I please have the first petition titled Flemington Community Hub presented?
Thank you, Mayor. Council has received a petition which is in 2 parts. The first part has been received via change.org and that has 162 signatures, and that requests Council to reconsider the location of a new community hub in Flemington. And the second part is a hard copy with 42 signatures requesting Council to reconsider the proposed location for the hub at Debney's Park, and also requesting that no new building be located on the parkland between the DHHS land and the Oval. So, Mayor, I would like to move that Council resolves to 1, receive and note the online and hard copy petition, 2, refer this matter to the Director of Planning and Development for investigation and reporting back to Council, and 3, advise the organiser accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sorais. Thank you. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, can I please have the second petition titled On-Street Parking along the Boulevard Aberfeldy presented?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council has received a petition with 6 signatures opposing on-street parking on the boulevard and would rather Council provide parking built into the nature strip on the park side of the boulevard. So I'd like to move that Council resolves to receive and note the petition, refer the matter to the Director of Planning and Development for investigation, reporting back to Council, and advise the petition organiser accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We now come to public question time, and we have received questions from 2 community members for tonight's meeting. I will now ask Mr. David Mlakota, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, sorry. Mlakota, maybe? Okay, thank you. To come to the lectern to read his first question, and then I'll ask the relevant director or manager to provide a response, and then I'll ask David to read his second question. I'll just remind residents that once the answer has been provided, there is no opportunity for further questions, comment or debate. So, David, yes.
Both my questions relate to the proposed development at 103 and 105 Ogilvy Street in Essendon.
as the proposal will significantly increase the number of vehicles in an already congested street and will reduce the available street parking. If the development is approved in its current format, how does Council propose to deal with this problem?
Thank you, David. I'll ask Ms Reiter, who's our Director, to respond to that question.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. The technical assessment of the proposal found that the volume of traffic generated would not cause unreasonable impacts on the surrounding road network. Potential impacts to on-street were similarly found to be acceptable, and that visitor car parking demand could be accommodated. The existing traffic conditions in the area are being managed in accordance with the Buckley Park Traffic Management and Parking Management Plans as adopted by Council on the 26th of June 2016.
Thank you. Did you have a second question too, David?
Developments next door and directly opposite the site have been able to provide adequate off-street parking and have an aesthetic that improves the streetscape. As this is clearly achievable by reducing the number of proposed dwellings from 5 down to 4, will Council demand that this proposal be amended so that it does not adversely affect the neighbouring properties because of the increased traffic and parking congestion and its ugly appearance?
Thank you. I'll ask Ms Reiter again to respond.
Consistent with the previous response, the off-street parking for residents is provided in accordance with the requirements of the car parking clause in the planning scheme, being 2 for each dwelling, and the reduction of 1 visitor parking space was considered acceptable as previously mentioned. The amendment made to the architectural theme of the development on the 4th of April this year was considered to achieve a respectful presentation to the streetscape.
Thank you, Ms Reiter. Thank you, David.
I'm sorry, I know I'm not allowed to ask, but if there was amendments made to that, how come the objectors weren't notified of the amendments made to the proposal?
I'll let Ms Reiter answer that if you can.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. It will have been because it was not seen to in any way detriment the people opposing the matter, and hence would have just been considered as a benefit that those opposing the development have received.
So how do we know what those amendments are?
Sorry, I can't go into that now because we're in the formal part of the meeting, but thank you very much. I'd now like to invite Terry Capadais to the lectern to read his question.
Okay, so my 2 questions are with regards to the same development as David's questions. How is a 5-dwelling development more appropriate than 4 or 3 for the pre-existing amenities and streetscape, including but not limited to the following: off-street parking capacity per dwelling, on-street parking congestion, facade design and streetscape suitability, internal habitable spaces versus external spaces?
I'll get Ms Reiter to answer that.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Whilst the number of dwellings is an important consideration, it is not a determining criteria for overdevelopment. And indicators for overdevelopment include measurable standards such as site coverage, building setback and mandatory garden area requirements. So as an example, a 4-dwelling proposal might achieve a compliant site coverage, while a 3-dwelling proposal with perhaps more bedrooms or larger living areas and possibly less secluded private open space on the same land may exceed the site coverage standard. So the 3-dwelling proposal might then be refused on that basis, along with related reasons such as amenity impacts or inadequate landscaping. So as you can see, the number of dwellings is not the determining factor, and in this case, the final assessment found the proposal achieved compliance and was acceptable overall, subject to conditions.
My second question is, both 4 and 5 dwellings on 2 lots will achieve the medium density requirements. How and why is 5 more suitable than 4 in consideration of the pre-existing surrounding homes and their constituents?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. per the previous response, that the number of dwellings is not the material element here. It's site coverage, garden area requirements and setbacks. They're the more pertinent factors rather than simply the number of dwellings. Thank you, Terry. There's no further questions, so I shall move on to the reports from special committees, and there are none tonight. So the first report on tonight's agenda is planning application at 103 to 105 Ogilvy Street, Essendon. Councillors, do I have a motion? A motion for 103 to 105 Ogilvy Street, Essendon.
I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lawrence. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Gattari-Morici, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will, thank you. I guess I'd like to move it for discussion. There are things I see as benefits about the proposal, and there are things that I still have a problem with. As an overarching theme, the questions earlier identified that there were a number of changes that have been made, which residents may not be aware of unless they have trawled through the agenda for tonight and the attachments for tonight. As background, we met with residents in May 2018, and that consultation meeting had good attendance with a large number of objections raised around things like character and parking and setbacks. The plans were amended in November 2018 and then further amended in April 2019. The 2019 amendments include changes to things like the roof for the character, the colour palette to be lighter, and improved setbacks. So the changes that have been made, along with a significant amount of conditioning from the planners, address the majority of the concerns. There's still the building heights and the overlookings have been conditioned, and the minor non-compliances are for a north-facing window setback, which is impacted by a garage roof, and a street setback, which is impacted by 20 centimetres of a porch. So on balance, the majority of it I'm really comfortable with. There's still a couple of concerns I have. I have a concern around the visitor parking not being met, but also that there were 2 additional visitor car parks provided on dwellings 1 and 3 that there's a condition to remove. You're in effect going from 2 driveways to 5 driveways and 2 dwellings to 5 dwellings, so you are inherently doubling the number of residents that live in the area and reducing street parking, and parking is already a problem in Ogilvy Street and the surrounding streets as well. So I am not particularly pleased at that aspect of the proposal. But the one that concerns me the most is particularly around the flooding concerns that were raised by a number of residents at that meeting. And there's a lengthy section of Melbourne water conditions that they'll need to comply with because of the flood path that runs along the back. And I am appreciative that they are conditioned, and that should hopefully resolve some of the concerns. I'm just also mindful about those conditions, if they're achievable, and are reliant on a developer doing the right thing. So for me, on balance, I support the proposal, because I know that if it was to go to VCAT and we were to refuse it, we would end up with a less positive outcome and potentially not as many conditions as there are. So that's my current stance.
Thank you, Councillor Gattari-Morici. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and yes, I welcome the opportunity to speak to this proposal. Look, the frontage of over 40 metres onto Ogilvy Street is significant. They're 2 large blocks that, if were put forward as separate entities, would be potentially 2 dual occupancy developments that could be taking up the whole frontage of these 2 blocks. There is a special building overlay that relates to the floodplain, as Councillor Marucci mentioned, and it's good to see that Melbourne Water have conditioned this with 12 significant conditions, and then our council-owned planning department has issued considerable conditioning as well. In fact, over 50 conditions, including sub-clause conditions. So that tells me that they've looked very carefully at this proposal and said there are significant issues that need to be addressed for this development, and that we as a council, and the planning department I'm referring to here, need to take those into consideration, and I applaud that. And that, I think, is listening to what has occurred at the consultation meeting that both Councillor Gaucho, Marucci and myself were at, and I think the developer has realised that there are issues that they need to address, and that's noted in the amendments that have occurred on the setbacks, particularly to the second floor, where there's been an increase in setbacks from, I note, 6.7 metres to 7.75 metres, 7.2 metres to 8.7 metres, and these are at the street front. And then on the second floor at the back from 20.14 metres to 22.89 metres on dwelling 2 and 3 and 4, a similar type of increase in the setback. So they're listening to the issues that are related to the local area, particularly in the development itself, and then for that makes it a more appealing development in that area. I'm not suggesting that it's the best outcome, but if this development went to VCAT, we have to be very aware that it's going to sneak through the system. The members there are going to say, there's not a lot wrong with this, and just rubber stamp it. But at least by going through council planning department conditioning the outcome, we end up with a development that's going to be at least palatable to the local residential area. I also note that the actual amendment of the design is far more appealing than it was originally, with that square blocky look, to now being more in keeping with the streetscape and the neighbourhood of that area. Car parking again is always an issue. It's an issue with any development, be it a 5-unit development or a 3-unit development. There's always issues over parking, but at least in this case we've got 2 extra car parking spaces that we wouldn't have otherwise, and that, to me, at least, again, they're listening to the car parking issues as well as the other. Building heights, council's conditioned that. It's got to meet the 10-metre maximum building height. There was I think one of the units was over that height, so now they have to actually bring that back under through the conditioning through council. Overall, the proposal...
Councillor Lawrence.
Okay, just one minute or half a minute if I could. Overall, the proposal complies with the relevant res code standard and the local amenity in the neighbourhood. And as I mentioned before, if this was to go to VCAT, we would probably find that maybe a lot of the conditions wouldn't be on there, and that it would just go through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Serace.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually won't be supporting the motion, and for the following reasons. In the report it says that it requires 1 visitor car space, however this proposal provides none. When you look at the amended exterior design for this group of 5 dwellings, it's not in character with the area at all. You've only got to drive down Ogilvie Street to see that they're predominantly single-storey, old weatherboard, some Californian-style homes. We're looking at moving from 2 driveways or openings there to 5, which must be a loss of on-street parking for a start. So I don't believe that this grand development is appropriate for this area. I think when you're looking at 5 triple-storey, 4-bedroom dwellings, that's quite a surmountable amount of people that would be living in there. So that, to me, reads a lot more vehicles. So with the loss of some of the curbing there for parking, I think, in my view, that there is going to be traffic and parking issues. And whilst I understand there have been some amendments with the plans and some other configuration changes, I personally don't believe that does fit in with the character of the area. I think that there possibly may be issues with parking and with traffic, and so therefore I do not support the recommendation that's been moved.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Marshall?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I speak in support of it only because I look at, as we are required to do, how this particular application measures up against the planning rules that apply to the particular site. And Councillor Lawrence has rightly pointed out that this is a large site with a large street frontage. And if you look at the way that the Res Code assessment, which in a residentially zoned area is really incredibly important, I'm actually struggling to think of an application recently that has had such a high level of compliance with Res Code. More often than not, we see very significant deviances by the time things get here with Res Code, and the areas for the most part have been able to be addressed via conditions. And again, as both councillors Gauci, Marici and Lawrence have pointed out, sometimes to the extent that you can deal with some of those issues of concern via conditions, you are better doing it at this stage than rolling the dice at VCAT and seeing what happens there. Again, I acknowledge the issues with parking in and around Moonee Valley more generally, but in the whole time I've been on council, there has been one time that parking has ever been an argument that we have had any success with at VCAT, and that is amongst hundreds and hundreds of planning applications. So I would hate to think that we would miss or give residents the impression that going in there with a waiver of one visitor car parking space is something that would be given weight by VCAT, because based on immense experience, it just wouldn't be. So the issues around how we manage streets is an issue that council can and should be looking at, and we can manage street parking via restrictions, via permits, a whole range of processes and tools that we have as a council to be able to use. But given the level of compliance with this one, and I take a slightly different view, Councillor Sorais, in relation to the design elements, I do think the revised design is more in fitting with the area. And I think I might have had some trouble supporting it from a design and bulk and scale perspective if that the original design was still holding. But on balance, I think sometimes you need to think about how this is likely to play out, and I think it's an application that we should support.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? No. Councillor Gauci, would you like to close? Okay, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? Councillor Sorais, Councillor Sharp and Councillor Gauci. So that motion is carried. The next item on tonight's agenda is a planning application at 15 Nicholas Court, East Keilor. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that the Council issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV/795/2018 for the construction of 5 dwellings to the rear of the existing dwelling at 15 Nicholas Court, Keilor East, Lot 292 on PS 146002W in accordance with the following grounds of refusal. 1. The proposal fails to meet the overarching objective and the strategies of Clause 15.01-2 Urban Design Principles of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, and it would result in an urban design outcome that fails to positively contribute to the local character. 2.
the proposal fails to meet the strategies contained within Clause 21.06-4 Objectives and Strategies Urban Design of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and would result in a development that fails to appropriately respond to its location and the surrounding context and would result in an unacceptable bulk when viewed from Steel Creek. 3, the proposal fails to achieve acceptable outcomes in terms of neighbourhood character. In particular, it does not respond appropriately to the following design guidelines of the Garden Court 3 precinct under the Moonee Valley Neighbourhood Character Study 2012. A, building height, form and layout. 4, the proposal fails to provide a sufficient car parking as required under Clause 52.06 car parking of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and would exacerbate parking problems in the surrounding area. 5, the proposal fails to satisfy the following standards contained within Clause 55, 2 or more dwellings on a lot of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and does not achieve an acceptable outcome in terms of the following objectives. A, Clause 55.03-10 parking location. B, Clause 55.04-1 side and rear setbacks. And C, Clause 55.04-6 overlooking. 6, the proposal will cause adverse traffic impacts on the surrounding area which will be substantial and unreasonable.
All right, thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do we have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Serace, thank you. Are there any questions regarding this motion, councillors? No. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will. First of all, I'd like to set the scene for 15 Nicholas Court. So this application is in a court, obviously over 2,000 square metres. It's for 1 5-bedder and 5 3-bedders. The site coverage for the application is 43%, permeability 32% and garden area at 36%. There were 24 objections received from 18 properties, which I think most people should know was just about every single person in the court. The positioning of it, if you're not familiar with Nicholas Court, it's right down the bottom of Rose Hill Road, just past St Bernard's, just next to the creek. The reason why I've put up this refusal today is for a number of reasons that I've just read out in depth, but there were some things that really stuck out to me when I went to this consultation meeting. First of all, Res Code, even though when we look at ticks and crosses in Res Code, and sometimes that's a really good idea, when it comes to a court scenario, things don't always add up. Just because it's on 2,000 square metres, the way that the frontage is so small and it pans out, by squeezing effectively six dwellings onto this land, it just doesn't work. How this court is arranged is the way the dwellings will run across will actually have that really sensitive interface with the creek. And I suppose that was one thing that was brought up quite a bit in the consultation meeting. And to me, as somebody who knows that side, not so much the court as well, but where the creek and the interface with St Bernard's is, that's open space and it's really valuable to the community down there. People really enjoy Steel Creek and they don't necessarily want people, developments not being compliant with setbacks within this application and overlooking any particular areas. The next thing that I wanted to bring up was the neighbourhood character. This again was discussed in depth at the consultation meeting. Most of the dwellings in this court are in fact single dwellings. I understand that there is a lot of change going on in neighbourhoods, but this particular court, if you ever drive past it, and I do regularly, as a lot of people in East Keilor would, it is really at capacity as it is, with really large dwellings, and the court with a very unusual, I suppose, kink in it, limits the amount of parking. It's quite narrow, and with all these really big dwellings that already have quite a few cars parked out the front of them, it makes it quite difficult with the safety. And one thing that I should add that was brought up at the consultation meeting was someone said that it was already difficult to get parking in this court, and because of where it's located at the bottom of the hill and with the lines on Rose Hill Road, if they weren't able to get a car park in the court, they would actually have to walk a significant way up the hill and then turn up Breeze Road to park their car, and then have to walk back through down Rosehill Road and potentially into the court, which is very dark and creates safety issues as well. So that's in the back of my mind when putting up this refusal. Waste management was brought up. There were some very interesting videos that were circulating in terms of how a waste truck already gets into the court. And another thing that I did want to mention was the residents in Nicholas Court have had success at VCAT before. There was a planning application that went through. It was at 14 Nicholas Court, and it was eventually it was 4 stories, and there was council refused, no VCAT appeal lodged. Then there was a development of 3 double-storey dwellings. Council refused and VCAT refused, and then it eventually got approved at VCAT for 2 multi-level dwellings at 14 Nicholas Court. Quite some time ago. Their permit was issued in 2004. But it just shows that I think there are particular sensitivities around this court that that we need to respect. And as a councillor, I definitely drove past many times at all different times of the day and could see a lot of the issues with it. And I hope that other councillors can see the merit in this refusal and why I think that this is one that needs to go to VCAT. Or potentially if the applicant wants to take it there, or they can come back with a better plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's not much more to say, actually. Councillor Byrne has covered all of those grounds for objection in depth, which was some of the things that I was going to say. But just to reiterate that I do believe also that it would exacerbate the parking problems in the surrounding area. And it does fail to satisfy the standards contained within clause 55 of 2 or more dwellings on one lot. Nicholas Court, as you say, is an unusual court. Having lived in a court myself for many years, parking is diminished with driveways, and therefore it makes it difficult. And the location of Nicholas Court, coming onto Rosehill Road and Breeze Road being the next one further up, there's very limited space for people if they're having a party or whatever for car parking there. So I do believe that it would cause traffic impacts on the surrounding area also. So nothing more to add than apart from what you've said.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? No, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Sorais, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gauchi-Marici, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? Myself, Councillor Shah. That motion is carried. So the next report on tonight's agenda relates to planning application at 10 Grange Road, Airport West. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move the officer's recommendation with a slight change, a slight addition in under the endorsed under point 2, an addition of G and H.
Extra additions? Yes, could you please read them out?
Yep. So under the endorsed conditions, G being the vehicle accessway lengthened to the eastern tidal boundary to provide more turning area to vehicles exiting the dwelling 6 garage, and H, any required reductions to the overall development footprint in order to maintain compliance with the minimum garden area requirement of clause 32.08-4 general residential zone minimum garden area requirement of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme as a result of condition 2G.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconder, Councillor Sorais. Any questions on that motion, councillors? No. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will, and I do this one. This one is quite an unusual application as well. This one I originally saw, first of all, I just want to say that it's on the corner of Grange and Fullerton Road with a vacant block next to it, right where the roundabout is in Airport West. When I originally saw this application, it actually came through as 5 dwellings. I sat in a consultation meeting with some quite enthusiastic residents, I suppose, that really wanted to get a better outcome for the area. They weren't happy with 5 with the original application, and for one of very few times the applicant actually took the feedback on board and came back with revised plans, being 3 triple story dwellings, being 3 4-bedders. One of the things that was mentioned initially was that they wanted bigger houses. The word shoeboxes was used quite regularly when it was 5 dwellings. And whilst I do want to say that whilst the new application does decrease the site coverage and increase the permeability, it is still quite bulky, and I suppose that is one of the reasons why I had to think, well, it's still 3 really big dwellings, is it going to add to the area? But then I referred back to what was spoken at the consultation meeting, and there is a lack of a lot of diverse dwellings, I suppose, in Airport West. There's not a lot of 4-bedders, and there's not a lot of townhouses that have double car garages. So I suppose this applicant has really tried to work with the feedback that was given. And yes, they are big, and there were some issues with the turning circles, and I thank Councillor Marshall for bringing that up. But I do think that based on where this application is very compliant with Res Code. I think that it will, if we don't approve this triple story, it will be interesting to see what the applicant then decides to do, the 3 triple stories. I just think that at the end of the day, when blocks of land get redeveloped, most people, ideally, if they were your neighbour, they want it to be bulldozed and rebuilt with 1 dwelling. But realistically, it's not necessarily going to happen. And I think that this is a really well negotiated outcome between the residents that I've spoken to and the applicant, and I think that if all consultation meetings can come with a result such as dropping 2 of the dwellings, that's a good outcome for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Thrace.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nothing much more to add to Councillor Byrne, but yes, it's probably a win-win in the long term in relation to the reduction of the amount of dwellings, and I'm glad that you've included those conditions also as far as vehicle access and turning points. I know myself, I live in a rear unit of block of 3, although there's only 1 in front of me, and my neighbours' garage is next to me. I know they always have difficulty turning their vehicle in and out of the garage, so that is really important. So nothing much more to add, but the fact that I support the motion that you've moved.
Thank you, Councillor Thrace. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? No? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Thrace, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne. What did I say? Oh, unanimous. Thank you. Sorry. The next item on the agenda is the update on response to the notice of motion 2017-20 Smart City. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Okay, Councillor Cusack.
I'll move the the officer's recommendation. That's the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lawrence. Thank you. Any questions, councillors? No. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
The issue of smart cities is not one that's going away, and this was brought to council initially to start to get the ball rolling in terms of how we're to be able to describe and to become much more literate about what we're doing in terms of smart cities and putting some of the ticks under the box of what that heading actually means. A lot of people think that if you don't have the newest whiz-bangery of all time, you haven't got a smart city. And I'm thinking of the example that I see around. There's a lot of billboards in the city and so on like that in Melbourne right now about Maroochydore and how that's the being held up as best practice in smart cities. A lot of people don't understand that the centre of Maroochydore used to be a golf club, So when they knocked over the golf club, they built a whole city on the golf club, and that they got the benefit of that. But I see in this response to the motion that clearly council is doing a lot of things within the capacity of its budget to bring forward a number of the critical things that are, at the end of the day, applications of new technology to solving problems. And that's the point of a smart city. And it's about how we continue to look and continue to be open-minded towards doing that. So there are a few things that I think that we'll need to continue to keep working hard on. I take this recommendation, I've taken it on board, but I think that obviously from a council point of view we'll just continue to keep working on those things. It'd be nice if we could actually start recognising quite publicly where the smart city stuff is going to. It's something that has to be worked into all of our procurement, it needs to be worked into our thinking around climate change, it needs to be worked into our thinking about best practice for building and planning and all of those sorts of bits and pieces. And the classic challenge that's right in front of everybody right now is electric cars are just around the corner. How are we responding to that notion of needing to be able to jack up a car and put a bit of juice into it if it's not got enough to get home? So there are those many issues that are still confronting the smart city, but at present I'm pleased to see that there is a good report card coming out of this for us, and that we will need to keep working harder in that space.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, taking Councillor Cusack's point that technology and the benefits to our residents and to our city are really what this is all about, and a smart city uses technology and embraces it and brings the residents with them on that journey, and that's what I think we're on about here. We're trying to implement intelligent, smart moving technical benefits that make it better for communication, that have rubbish bins that compact far better using solar power. We have Wi-Fi systems that are available for free in our activity centres, in our community centres, in our sporting pavilions. These all benefit everybody within our community, and that's what this is all about, and that's what I see as being a smart city. I mean, a stupid city doesn't do that, and we're not a stupid city. Oh, I hope we're not. No, I'm sure we're not, and that's the benefit of what we're seeing here. I also like to point out that for our residents that we are upgrading our computer systems within the Moonee Valley City Council. There's been a bit of a lagging of technology improvements in that area, and Council has bitten the bullet and said, well, we need to move forward on this to make it a better engaging computer system that makes it easier for residents to handle, and so that residents have a better customer relationship that goes on within Council and with residents, and that's to be applauded. So this is all a changing environment, a technical environment I'm referring to there, not the green environment, and it's progressing the way Moonee Valley does engage with its residents and makes our council city a smarter city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. The next item is agenda item 10.5, and it relates to the Development Contributions Plan Costing Package. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Are there any questions regarding this item, councillors? No. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Now, last time this came to Council, I was relentlessly mocked for saying that this getting this into our planning scheme was on my bucket list, but I stand by that statement, and mock me as you may. So this has been, I suppose we've had a few little curveballs, but when you look at the level of work required to pull the information together for this to stand up in a panel process, it is enormous. And fundamentally, we have to get our costings right, because when they are challenged, we need the panel members to be very clear that we have the justification to support what is being proposed. So where we are now is basically there were some discrepancies identified in some projects, and they have been corrected, and hopefully we will now have authorisation given to put this out on exhibition. And again, as is the way the planning process works, it's long and onerous, but you certainly have the opportunity to have your say. People can put in submissions to this when it is out on exhibition, and as I said, we'll most likely end up in a panel process with all that involves. But why this is important fundamentally, well, I might joke about it. Ultimately, my desire to see this in the planning scheme was driven by that sense that when developers are profiting from developments, as they are entitled to do, that the infrastructure needs that their developments create, they should help fund. And that's simply what it's about. So you'll see that while the DCP, assuming it all goes ahead, will collect a proportion of the money needed to fund what are very significant infrastructure demands in Moonee Valley, obviously the rest of those infrastructure payments will be funded by other mechanisms. But it's certainly better than what we've got now, which is essentially a free ride. So I'm hoping that this might be the last time we see this for some time, and the next time might even be when we're considering the finally getting it to that point where it almost might be part of the planning scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall, would any other councillor... no, I need to ask Councillor Cusack if he would like to speak to the motion.
Well done to the bucket list, and I'm glad it came came out and surfaced as it has. The importance of this scheme is that it lends intellectual weight to the decision making of where money is going to be applied, and it gets away from that area of guessing, so that there are a number of critical things that need to be done in this municipality, as Councillor Marshall points out, that balance out the developments that have occurred. Developments that have occurred are putting enormous infrastructure pressure on our infrastructure across the municipality. And this is an obvious way to work around that. It's clearly important that not the ratepayers don't have to keep carrying the full import of what happens when a developer decides to create something in their area, and that it can't be just, as we know anyway, that the government has said we've been playing with a 2.5% rate cap for some time. It can't be all of that applied to fixing up those issues. So this makes sense of the projects, the time that it's going to be done in, and the amount of money it's going to be picked up, and how it's going to be allocated. Of course, it's open for submissions, it's open for conversation. I note that there is, as Councillor Marshall's pointed to, there's some minor edits that will need to be done, but it also gives some comfort, I hope, to ratepayers down the track and residents down the track that these projects will be completed within a time frame. They are planned to be done and finished, not on the long finger. So if there are, frankly, there are penalties that will occur if you don't get the job done in the time frame that this plan is in place. And so consequently, I'm sure that it will get a lot of support from the community as a result of that as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cusack, would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? No. Councillor, well, I shall put that to the vote actually. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is Council Plan 2017-21, Quarter 3 Progress Report for January to March 2019. So, councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. What would you like to move?
Just the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sorais, thank you. Are there any questions, councillors, regarding the council plan? No. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only just to say this is it's pretty much an administrative report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak? No. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next agenda item is 10.7 and it relates to the submission to the Victorian Parliament Environment and Planning Committee's inquiry into recycling and waste management. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council resolves to adopt both Council's comments regarding MAV's submission to the Parliamentary Commission for inclusion in their submission and Council's own direct submission to the Parliamentary Commission on the inquiry into recycling and waste management, subject to the following additions. 1, in Council's submission, a point addressing the ethical issues associated with the transfer of waste to other countries. And 2, in both submissions, a point addressing the importance of increased focus on waste reduction and minimisation, including financial investment and regulation as appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Are there any questions relating to this item, councillors? No. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the motion?
Actually, just a point of clarification that maybe an officer could perhaps check while the debate's going, if that's all right, because I don't want to hold up. I'm just trying to work out whether it actually should be Parliamentary Commission or Parliamentary Committee. I've got a feeling it might meant to be, but yeah, if just Mary, if that's all right, and I'm happy to continue debate if that's okay with you.
Yes, please, yep, thank you.
So there has been a parliamentary committee set up which is conducting an inquiry into recycling and waste management in Victoria. And obviously the MAV has prepared a submission. We've made some comments in relation to that. And I'm also really appreciative that officers have taken the time for Moonee Valley to prepare its own submission, because the easiest thing to do would have been for us just to ride on the coattails, if you like, of the MAV. So it's really, I think it's great that the officers have taken that step of preparing our own separate submission. Obviously, the decision by China to stop accepting our recycling in the way that they did had very significant implications for councils and really probably brought to a head an issue that had been festering away for quite some time. We know that it led to stockpiling. We know that we had closures of facilities and we had councils put in a really difficult position where we had to negotiate or renegotiate the terms of our contracts in situations where in some ways we were left with few options. So again, I certainly acknowledge the work that our officers did in being very agile in having a new someone to receive our recycled goods. It's always really tough in that situation where you're trying to get someone when ultimately you haven't got much bargaining power. So I think they did a great job. It's stating the obvious to say that this has to be a three-tier approach. All levels of government have a role to play, and everyone has to step up, look at regulation, look at a range of different things that the various levels of government can do to try and resolve this issue. Just to date, there has not been a level of coordination, there hasn't been a level of strategic thinking about the issue of waste. In some ways you feel like everyone's almost put their hands over their ears just pretending that it'll all go away. But it won't. And that's why, as the submissions indicate, for each level of government we have things that we can all do individually, but we all need to work much better together and have a coordinated approach to this issue. We know that the state government is sitting on an enormous amount of money in the landfill levy, and that money has to be invested appropriately into dealing and addressing this issue. Certainly the suggestions around investment into recycling infrastructure, improved regulation of the sector. I know that there are lots of people who are very pro container deposit schemes. I'm probably a bit more on the fence. I see the pros and cons, but I acknowledge that the submissions indicate that that's something that should be put forward. Certainly at the federal government level, the issue of product stewardship, it's something like it's an ethical and moral issue as much as anything else, and it's incredibly important that these matters are addressed. They have to be addressed by regulation in part, because if you wait for people to catch up, unfortunately at times that financial imperative will override what is ethically the right thing to do. At local government level, we have many things we can do. Certainly we have, and we do play an incredibly important role in education, and that needs to be acknowledged, the work that we have done in making sure that people understand where different waste should be going and recycling. And interestingly, Yarra Council are doing their trial with stream separation. That's something that I hope this council really does look at very seriously. Our submission raises concerns rightly with the Sustainability Fund grants and our views as to whether that's an effective use of resources, and I think on any measure the answer would be no. And also talks about the issue of waste to energy facilities, and again I know there are different views out there about them, but it is something that needs to be considered very seriously entertained, and business cases prepared, and real analysis of the potential benefits and downsides too of a waste to energy facility. A couple of additional points that I've asked be put in there is around that ethical issue of us dumping our rubbish and recycling on other countries, and how we can continue to do that, continue to even contemplate it. And I hope that this issue of ethics and that transfer between countries really is one that comes to the fore increasingly. And the reality is, as developing nations become more wealthy, they just won't tolerate the rubbish and the nonsense that they've put up with previously. Also too, and this is for me something that is, and Mayor, I'm almost done, if I just could have a short time longer. If you look at the waste hierarchy, so much of our energy goes into the lower levels, if you like, and not enough goes into addressing the importance of actually reducing the creation of waste in the first instance. It is where we need to really start directing our energies, and again, with that comes, I suppose, a challenge to the way people consume and a challenge to the way that people think about their entitlement to goods and things like that. So it's a complex issue, and it's one that I hope continues to be thought about, continues to be addressed. I know I look at my children, and we had a situation recently where someone put a straw in a drink at the pub, and my husband brought it to our table, and my 7-year-old said, "Dad, you know that straws kill turtles, don't you?" So it's fair to say that I think in this generation that are growing up, they have a very significant awareness about waste and the issues associated with it. So again, I really thank officers for their work and hope that something comes out of the parliamentary inquiry, because we certainly can't continue having things go on as they have.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I also applaud the officers in taking forward this opportunity to make a submission to the Victorian Parliament inquiry, and I think that there are a few important things that are coming out in this. And when I read the report and I looked at some of the summary document, the word leadership is used a lot in this. And leadership is something that is done in all sorts of different ways by lots of people. Councillor Marshall has just identified the leadership that children can play in this game, and it's not a minor matter. Children are really a conscience about this, and it's important that they continue to take forward this message as they become young adults and in the future decision makers in our community. A few comments about waste, and this is where I have always sort of struggled with it. Waste is part of a cycle, and that cycle starts obviously with the production of something, and it's how we produce things so that is leading to where the waste piles up. And the cost of production, we're often told, is massively high. The cost of waste is as equally high, and so managing it is a really sensible and important thing that we need to do, is bring all of the players together. So again, the notion of 3 tiers of government being involved in this, but also that I would like to see extended out to where business is involved in this, not just from the point of view of businesses managing waste and building whatever the infrastructure is that ultimately new science and new technology will give us, and that I know is part of what's in this report. And we see only in the last week or two the announcements of those 2 new plants, one in New South Wales and one in Sydney and one in South Australia, to look at a very different way of managing landfill. But so the application of new technology is all in that space. But we need to also start having those conversations with the production side of it and how that actually happens. So therefore, as we look at this submission, we are talking about packaging and we are talking about those sorts of issues, but it obviously needs to go a lot deeper. And so therefore, it's good to see that our council is really taking that on. And I just want to applaud the council for some of the initiatives that it's taken over the years in trying to do that. Councillor Marshall took up the question of education, which I had a person on the phone not long ago saying, you're not doing enough on the education front, and I kind of another little bit, not doing enough on the education front, and yet we're pouring lots of resources into that. And I'd ask anybody who's a member of the community to just spend 5 minutes, if you want, jump onto our website and talk to some of the people who are involved in this work from council, and you'll soon see that there is so much going on. And one of the things that we're very, very keen to do is to make everybody a champion about waste. So whether it's what you're doing on the roadside, or the curbside collections, with what you're putting in the bins, and what we're doing in terms of how we use recycled product in our buildings and in our work that we're doing around the place, e.g. the plastics and so on like that, are all important things. But getting this message into the government at the higher levels is equally as important. And so top notch, well done. I really applaud the submission. I think it's a great step forward.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Cerise?
Yeah, just a couple of things to add to the comments from Councillor Marshall and Councillor Cusack. I also applaud the council for our involvement in recycling and waste management and awareness of the environment with regards. I remember a couple of years ago that we launched the whole Bubbles Not Balloons campaign, and we have been very actively involved with our carbon footprint in relation to solar panels and all those wonderful environmental issues. Just picking up on what Councillor Marshall said with regards to foreign countries and not accepting waste, etc. I understand that China have stopped taking in the waste because of climate change, etc., and they had to actually do something because of the amount of waste and refuge that was being piled upon their country. And being such a large country, I'm not sure about India and what they are doing, but we all know it's a worldwide issue, and it is at the forefront of everything in the media and politically at the moment. It seems to be one of those major issues. So again, I applaud the council on what they are doing in relation to a submission supporting MAV's submission to the Parliamentary Committee. And also I think it's important from the educational aspect from it. I mean, our kids learn so much in school about all these different aspects, and unfortunately everybody's so busy in their lifetime. I remember when I was a kid, we had the metal bins that the garbage man used to come and collect and pick up, but the family and our parents, we'd put refuge into the garden to use as mulch and waste rather than putting it into different recycling bins. And I would say that probably most people I speak to, they've got a recycle bin and they've got the red bin, the green bin and the yellow bin, but they don't really know what goes in that yellow bin. So it's all about education and it's all about making people more aware, and we have to consistently keep doing that. So whether it's through media, whether it's through our council webpage, and I know we have a lot of programs that we do reach out to the community, but for those people that are really busy in their lives and working and families, etc., just take a little bit of time out. And if everybody does that, we should be having a great environment. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Soares. Any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will quickly, and I want to thank the councillors for speaking. They've touched on some really good points. I think that one of the things is there obviously is the 3 tiers of government, and we can obviously do what we can at our level. But just this week I read an article that Hobson's Bay are actually trialling in conjunction or in partnership with Cleanaway, the first electric vehicle garbage disposal trucks. So that's one way that Hobson's Bay are being leaders in this space as a council, and it will be really interesting for us as a council when we are coming to decisions about these to actually put our money where our mouth is. Are we willing to spend the extra dollars and fully support, or support more so, some of these new initiatives? Because they may cost us dollars, but if we don't do this, it will cost our environment. Another thing that I just wanted to add is, and it just happens to be on Thursday, if you're free, Moonee Valley City Council are hosting at Moonee Ponds Bowls Club a children's clothing swap. And as somebody who has two under 2 at the moment, and one was born in summer and one was born in winter, it is very hard to have the second one be able to wear the first one's clothes. And so this is a really great initiative from Moonee Valley City Council. You bring along 10 items of children's clothing in new or used conditions, get tokens and swap them for somebody else's clothes. So I think that this is one of the things when we've spoken about education and we've spoken about reusing items. Things are so cheap when you buy them new often when you know, let's be honest, we all love Kmart, but we have to think about, instead of consistently just buying these things for a few dollars, what actually happens? What's the cost of, not the cost of purchasing the item, but as we've said before, the cost of actually disposing it. So if you're free on Thursday between 9:30 and 10:30 is the drop-off, and then 10:30 to 11:30 is the exchange, and you've got clothes to swap, I think that this is quite timely.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Lawrence.
Might as well get on the act. Everyone else has got something to say, but it's a good subject and an important one. One thing that I recall as a child, and wasn't that long ago, but was we used to recycle glass bottles because we were able to have a 5 cent, 10 cent, whatever recycle claim back every time you returned the glass thing. We don't have that in this state. I notice South Australia has it, and it's a worthwhile initiative because a lot of glass does not get recycled now. It just gets tossed into the ground with everything else, and we end up with just this constant waste build up that glass doesn't decompose very well. So it's just another aspect that we need to look at this in a holistic sense and an economic sense as well as environmental. and get the right outcomes. And I don't know how long there have been groups pushing for glass recycling initiatives for Coca-Cola and other lemonade bottles and the like. And the same with cans. Tin can be recycled as it used to be, as aluminium is as well, I should say. But it's not done nowadays because we don't have that initiative and that motivation to do it. So I just think these are the practical type of things that we need to take up in the state and get things moving on an environmental basis.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor? Okay, I shall put that to the vote. Oh yes, thank you. No, thank you. That should be committee. So that's just typographical error, correcting something a typographical change, correcting an error. So I won't be asking for an amendment for that, but as long as the mover and seconder is happy with that, change that to committee, that will be fine. It doesn't change the intent of the motion at all. So thank you very much for that reminder. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. The next item, 10.8, relates to the proposed sale of land from formerly discontinued road 16 Emerald Street, Essendon. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Gacci-Marici.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? No. Councillor Gacci-Marici, would you like to speak to the motion?
Very briefly, it's obviously mostly procedural. For those who have looked at the appendices, it is a tiny sliver of land on the side of the property that's currently fenced. I think importantly, just for those who are watching at home who wonder what happens next, notice goes out. If you are an abutting property, then you get informed of your rights as well. And the other important thing to note is that there is a sewer main within that land, so if an owner was to purchase it, it would come with an easement as well. So,
thank you, Councillor Gacci-Marici. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, not much to say about this one, Madam Mayor. Suffice to say that it is a slither of land, and I've written the same words, funnily enough. 16 Emerald Street was part of a road discontinued by Moonee Valley City Council, and this just tidies up a small parcel of land to the satisfaction of council and the landowner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is entitled Fisher Parade, Ascot Vale 1 to 3 and 23 to 25, Kingston Avenue, Ascot Vale, Public Acquisition Overlay. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Marshall?
In the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack. Are there any questions, councillors? No. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. What this motion is proposing is that council undertakes preliminary site investigations in relation to land affected by a public acquisition overlay located in Fisher Parade and Kingston Avenue in Ascot Vale. And I think it's important that we note that at this stage what we're doing is we're doing site investigations. I actually found this a great and fascinating report because I knew that the pedestrian and cycling linkage had been contemplated for many, many years, but I didn't realise that it had gone back to 1929. And so the report sets out that history and then also indicates that the overlay was actually put in a planning scheme in 1955. So it's been there for an incredibly long time, and it's been there since then. As a council, we've advocated for a number of years now for stronger controls over the river, and I note the officer's comments. I probably am not quite as exuberant. I think we've had some changes, but hopefully we have more changes to come. We certainly deserve, our Maribyrnong River does, the same type of protection that the Yarra River does, and that's ultimately where I hope we head. And certainly there is that sense through the waterways of the West and a range of other different mechanisms about the importance of looking after our waterways. And at the moment we've got what is really a difficult situation if you think about it, and it was brought to a head in some ways through a planning application that we had last year that was not particularly pleasant, but really just reinforced to me the importance of making sure, just creating some certainty, because at the moment there is no certainty. And what we have is really, to me, the situation where it's the worst of all worlds. So we've got this theoretical concept about a pedestrian and cycling linkage. We've got the land set there, but there's no definitive plans, and so landowners who, given the time the overlay's been there, would most likely have purchased their property subject to the overlay, so are aware of it, but again would view it as something that limits their ability to use the land, and that's understandable. And certainly over time there have been requests from owners to have the public acquisition overlay removed. And again, the report sets out that this was considered in some detail in 1998 when we were looking at the Moonee Valley planning scheme. And it's interesting when you look at the comments of the planning panel, and I'll just read out for a moment one of those comments. And the panel said, and this was, keep in mind, so over 20 years ago, further investigations should be carried out to determine the exact location of the intended acquisition in relation to each property affected. The affected landowners will therefore have a clear and accurate indication of the intention of council, and the process of acquisition by negotiation may be hastened. And unfortunately, here we sit 20 years later with nothing having been done. It's not appropriate to have this level of uncertainty, and again, if we are genuine in our concerns about the Maribyrnong River, we need to think about how that acquisition overlay is exercised, and if it's not going to be exercised, you think, well, why encumber land in that way? So there is no better time to me to get this ball rolling, and it might be that if the investigations come out, that there might be design elements that mean that you not potentially use all of the land. There might be a whole range of iterations, but we will never know that unless we actually start doing those preliminary investigations. So again, I'm pleased to see this here. This type of uncertainty is not good for anyone, and I think we just need to draw a line in the sand and do what it was recommended be done over 20 years ago.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for moving this motion, Councillor Marshall. The critical thing from people, from the perspective of people who live on that area, in that area, and are affected by this, is that they need certainty. At present, there are a lot of people who are very, very worried that council is going to literally tip them out of their beds and knock over their properties and just leave them destitute. And that's actually been said to me. So that's a view that needs to be disimbued very quickly. Thank you for the history lesson, Councillor Marshall. And as they say in the classics, in the fullness of time, it is about time. That area has changed dramatically over time, of course, and what was a lot of single dwellings all of a sudden became massive multi-storey dwellings and or multiple dwellings on properties, and all you have to do is stand over at Edgewater and look across, and you can see this great expanse of multiple dwellings all the way along there. The question that's in my mind is that the Maribyrnong River is a public space, and it is used by the public, but unfortunately we've got a strip of it in places built through practice and time and built on the basis of history, which is unfortunate, where public can't get to it. And yet there are famous stories about how all the trainers at Flemington used to use the river all the time for the horses and all the rest of it. And of course it was called Whiskey Hill because it was a very public space to go down and transport illegal booze up and down the Maribyrnong all those years ago. So it's always had a public thing. So this initial investigation to look at these different sites and to think our way through how this can be managed and looked at in a respectful way with the residents, but also to make sure that we are planning for the future. There are a number of planning, there are a number of documents out there that talk about planning for the Maribyrnong and what we can do with the river and how development affects the river, and we need to start thinking about applying some of those. And Councillor Marshall, you're absolutely right. We can't just sit here and sort of be the council that didn't do anything. I'd sooner be the council that did do something. And even if we find in the negative ultimately, and we can't make much of a shift, or we don't, or whatever, at least we've done the work. And at least we've given somebody some direction for the future. Whereas right now, we're picking up the ball from 1998 and trying to make some sense of it. So fair play. And I think that this is, most of our residents would be very happy about it. When I first started on council, there was a very celebrated backlash from a number of residents in not these houses, but a little bit further up towards the bridge at Maribyrnong Road, who would not allow us to do anything even like a promenade over the water at the back of their houses. So, and their argument was, this is about privacy. Well, at the end of the day, they've built right down onto the public space. So this public space was proposed to be used. So we need to sort through all sorts of bits and pieces like that. While it's a planning issue right now, it's obviously got a lot more deeper things to go. So.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne?
I'll just be really quick because obviously there's a lot of history to this, and I commend Councillor Marshall for moving the officer's recommendation. I suppose as councillors we sit here sometimes and we have to make some really tough decisions, and sometimes we've got to make decisions that can be, can greatly affect particular residents for the benefit of the wider community. And the amount of people that say to me, how come you can't just walk along that stretch of river? I suppose living in the area for a long time, there's a lot of people that are just over it and figure it will never happen, even though they were told consistently that it would eventually be able to. So it's good that this is eventually, well, hopefully going to at least create some certainty. But as Councillor Marshall said, this has been in place for a long time, and the majority, if not all, I would say, people bought their houses knowing that there was this, that this particular piece of land had this restriction on it, had the PAO over it. So it is what it is, and it will be very interesting to watch this piece play out.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Marshall, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gatchimarichi, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? It's myself. Item 10.10 relates to the proposed establishment of a special committee known as Lead West Committee. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack. Are there any questions, councillors? No. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Lead West was established as a company in 2007 as a regional organisation for Melbourne's West. Since this time, Lead West has had a focus on advocacy for the region. and has a non-for-profit membership-based organisation. The membership includes Brimbank, Hobsons Bay, Melton, Maribyrnong, Wyndham and ourselves, and other companies and organisations within Melbourne's West. I'm currently one of the directors on Lead West. In late 2018, following consideration of the organisation's priorities, the board decided to commence a strategic review process. This process reconfirmed the importance of the continued focus on the existing objective of Lead West, but it was agreed that there was a need for a new governance model that would better provide the required structure for the organisation to fully achieve its objective going forward in a more cost-effective and sustainable way. Following detailed consideration, it was agreed in principle to transition Lead West from a company to a council AusPass Section 86 special committee structure along the lines of the Inner Melbourne Action Plan model used by the cities of Melbourne, Yarra, Port Phillip, Stonnington and Maribyrnong. Obviously, having that Maribyrnong crossover, it was really good to get feedback from them. The necessary process to deregister Lead West as a company has commenced and is expected to be finalised by 30 June 2019. Following this deregistration, the new Lead West committee can commence. One of the first tasks of the committee will be to lead the development of a new 10-year strategic plan and 4-year rolling implementation plan. We need to think big, think city plans, sharing services and costs, and as we spoke about before, waste will no doubt be on the agenda. During previous discussions, previous key areas of focus for the strategic plan are jobs and skills, transport infrastructure and connectivity, health and wellbeing, and continuing environmental rehabilitation and sustainable development. It is envisaged that the plan will continue to emphasise the importance of building and maintaining strong partnerships with other levels of government, the private sector, other regional bodies and stakeholders. So what I'm doing tonight is moving this motion that the Council resolves to appoint myself, as per the officer's recommendation, and Councillor Sorais as the proxy, who will work alongside the Chief Executive and the proxy nominated by the Chief Executive from time to time, and Mr Jim Williamson, who was as the inaugural independent chairperson. This is something that has been discussed for a long time. Councillors have had briefs and questions answered. It's really important that we have a louder voice out in the West. The growth is astronomical, and whilst we need to have some form of body, what we had wasn't working. Hopefully this model that, as I've mentioned, the inner city councils have, I think will be of greater benefit for our advocacy arm. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Cusack.
Yep, thank you. Lead West was a very brave and thoughtful experiment that was set up in 2007. The notion of creating a partnership between council and businesses to take forward the needs of the West at the time was really, I think, as I said, a thoughtful and an amazingly important step. What unfortunately has happened is that company started to look at far too many things. It was looking at the sowing 1 million seeds and seeing what would occur, and unfortunately it was spreading itself too thin. And there was another thing that occurred as a phenomenon there, was that the reach and the voice of the outer rings councils was extraordinarily loud, and the advocacy process became very much focused on their needs, which are genuine and not to be ignored, but unfortunately it became unbalanced. And so as a consequence, our council was paying a lot of money to be involved in something that it necessarily wasn't getting a great deal of benefit out of. The new proposal is to actually strip this back and get the focus back onto how we as a council can have a stronger input into the question of advocacy, to realign what the organisation of the 6 councils is about, which is not to be a business that can take on all sorts of other business-like activities and so on like that, but to actually work within the resources of councils to shape what that advocacy plan is, to look at, and most fundamentally, in a different sort of way, is to look to the future where councils can actually share resources at critical points and make things happen, because people are sitting down around the table and putting in the advice on issues that we've not done previously. What happened in the previous one was we got an atomisation of the effort rather than an aggregation of the effort. And so this new structure, which is a committee under the Local Government Act, will hopefully give us that. It also it means because it's a bit cheaper, we can also go and play in some other fields and other sand pits. Maribyrnong's the example of the inner, being involved in that inner group. However, if I was somebody from Maribyrnong and I was a representative as a councillor in their area that butts right up against Brimbank, further down towards Braybrook and so on like that, I'd be starting to wonder how that inner part plays out for me. Ditto from this point of view, from this council, how would the people of East Keilor feel that they're being represented if we were in that inner group? But what we need to do is be flexible enough to be able to do both and to be able to sort our way through that, and also to have those conversations, comfortable conversations with Moreland and Hume and so on like that on the other side of the creek from here. So as a council, we can start to have that and bring those concerns to the table and build that into the discussions in the new form of Lead West, and to also shape that advocacy. So I think this is a really, really good outcome of something that needed to evolve. It needed to actually go through this process. And Mark, you, and I must pay great respect to some of the people who have been chairs of Lead West and some of those companies that have really put in over time to be part of it. And so I'm thinking of Anne Barker from City West Water and the likes of that, who are people of that ilk, who have been real champions at this and have supplied some really hot energy.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to support this motion because of several reasons, and the Councillor Cusack's actually raised some of the points that are pertinent in terms of the issues that Lead West have failed to achieve, in my opinion. And there has been money wasted, and considerable money. I mean, over 150,000 a year, from what I gather. So it's an organisation that has diminished in its influence, one could say, over a period of time, and there's been no real impact that I can see in both my time as a councillor and as a resident who's lived in this area for a long, long time, to the Moonee Valley community, in my opinion. It's time wasted by councillors, council staff, and Moonee Valley as City Council as a whole. The benefits have been little, and I really wonder about the connection of Moonee Valley with the likes of Melton, Brimbank, Wyndham, and to a lesser degree maybe Hobson's Bay. We're better connected as an inner urban council, and I hear what Councillor Cusack's saying, with the other inner urban councils such as Maribyrnong, Yarra, Port Phillip, Stonington, where we share similar problems, similar issues, similar demographic development and progressive inner urban ideas. And these are the councils that we're more in tune with and more sharing in terms of our issues. Why throw good money after bad on Lead West? It's a diminishing force. We should be joining forces with an inner urban Melbourne Action Planning Group that is obviously mentioned in the report. So finally, it's time to realign ourselves as Moonee Valley Council, not one that just throws good money after bad. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne, would you like to close?
I will, Madam Mayor. Thank you, and thank you for the comments. I suppose one of the reasons why I put my hand up to go on Lead West was because there definitely were, as Councillor Lawrence has pointed out, some particular inefficiencies. And as a councillor, I was sitting here saying, I'm not really sure what benefit we're getting out of Lead West. So instead of just sitting here, I put my hand up and said, well, let's try to change it. And that's something that I've worked very closely with Brian with over the last 12 months to go, well, we are paying just... it's significantly less than what Councillor Lawrence said, and my understanding is about $90,000 in terms of working with the West. But and yes, that is a lot of money. I'm not debating that. This is going to be probably half of that. And that's one of the things that we've been working towards, to be able to find a more sustainable model. And that's exactly why we're doing this. It is to be able to do something better. But to say that Lead West hasn't really achieved anything, I think that that's a bit offensive to Lead West. Probably the biggest project that it achieved was the 1 million trees that were planted out in the West. It was a big advocacy project and will have long-term benefits, no doubt. There definitely has been a real impact. In the last 12 months, probably one of the biggest things that we've been discussing has been our coordinated advocacy towards the airport rail link. As you can imagine, when we all sat down together, there were really different views in terms of which way we wanted the airport rail link to go. There were thoughts that it should go, there were 4 possible routes. Eventually it went through Sunshine, of which there were definitely people up at Rosehill Ward that were quite... they didn't really like the idea of having a train line through their backyard, but working with the other councils, they then came on board to say that they would support a stop in Airport West, which is massive because initially they were against that. They didn't want that because they wanted the quickest route to Sunshine, and this is obviously in the airport rail link and in the suburban rail loop. And so having the support from the wider Western councils is critically important when we're advocating towards state and federal government. I don't doubt that we do align ourselves. We should be also aligning ourselves potentially with Moreland, Darebin, Stonington, Melbourne, whoever it may be. But who's to say that we should only be aligning ourselves, that we should be getting rid of the West and going in the middle? It's like, for instance, Wyndham, they like to align themselves somewhat with Geelong and also with the West. So this is a better model going forward. I believe in this model, and we're trying to fix issues that we've had, and hopefully we get some really good outcomes at a much cheaper cost to the community.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Marshall, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gacci-Marici. All those against? Councillor Lawrence. That motion is carried. Agenda item 10.11 is Councillor Expenses Report, 1st of January 2019 to 31st of March 2019. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Marshall? What would you like to move?
Oh, sorry, the motion for the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, this is definitely an instance where the report speaks for itself, and obviously you can always check out Council's website if you're after more details.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. An excellent report.
Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next item on the agenda is notices of motion, quarterly report. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Gacci-Marici.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? No. Councillor Gacci-Marici, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only just very briefly, it's obviously very self-explanatory, and all of the notices of motion that are covered we debated at the time, but I did just want to draw attention to 3.3.1, which was the correspondence regarding the North Essendon Junction roundabout, because I know that there were some traders who shortly after that there was an incident at North Essendon Junction, an accident, and had asked us to advocate for them, and this letter had gone out pretty much the same period. So just to draw attention to the fact that that had actually been done around the same time. So letters have gone to the relevant ministers asking for signalisation around that period. So.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
No.
Any other councillor? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Agenda item 10.13 is a report on assemblies of councillors. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Lawrence.
Move a motion in the form of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Jeez. I was looking to you first, so Councillor Marshall. Any questions, councillors? No. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, it's simply an administrative report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall?
No.
Any other councillor? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Councillors, the next item of business is notices of motion, and we have one notice of motion tonight. Number 2019-15, sharing shed and library of things. So I'd like to call on Councillor Marshall to present her notice of motion.
Thanks, Mayor. I would like to move that Council resolves to 1. Receive a report at an upcoming ordinary Council meeting regarding the establishment of a sharing shed and libraries of things in Moonee Valley. The report should address issues including A. Potential sites, whether they be council-owned, operated, such as pavilions or men's sheds, etc., or privately owned sites such as the Cave. B. The role a sharing shed could play in waste prevention and reduction as per the highest priority in the waste management hierarchy. C. Potential community organisations that could partner in a sharing shed, including the Moonee Valley Repair Cafe, Sharing Shed Melbourne and other local organisations, and ensure these organisations are consulted with in relation to the report. And D. The role councils' libraries could play in expanding the items they loan to our community, in brackets like the Sacramento Public Library of Things, and or otherwise supporting a community-run sharing shed, in brackets like the Queensland State Library, close brackets. 2. Write to the relevant state government ministers and local state members requesting the establishment of a grant funding stream to fund councils in the establishment of sharing sheds, noting the Sustainability Fund as a potential funding source and the importance of supporting initiatives at the highest level of the waste hierarchy that involve repair, reduction, reuse or sharing of goods. And 3, approach Lead West and its member councils and the City of Melbourne in relation to the potential to work across councils, in brackets similar to the My Smart Garden program, close brackets, to create one or more sharing shed /repair cafe /reverse garbage facility /facilities.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Councillor Marshall, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I slipped into dictation mode there, didn't I? So we spoke earlier tonight, it's actually quite timely the way this worked out, about the importance of waste. And for me, as I mentioned in the debate on the earlier item, we really need to start focusing on the reduction of waste in the first instance. And that's really essentially what this motion is about. I'm not on social media much at all nowadays, but I did see what initiated me thinking about this was a discussion about someone who wanted to borrow cups and plates for a child's party, and was saying that they didn't want to have to go out and buy a whole new set for what was really going to be a one-off event. And then in this thread there was a discussion about different sharing sheds and libraries and other facilities that are around that people can go and borrow these things that are one-offs, rather than having to go out and ultimately they end up in landfill or recycling and whatever it is. And I then was fortunate enough to meet a couple of individuals who are involved in this movement, and including a Moonee Valley resident who's involved, and was really grateful for the information that they provided me and some of the issues that need to be considered if you're going down this path. I suppose if you think about the reasons why you might go down and establish either a sharing shed or library of things, or whatever you might like to have and whatever model you might choose, obviously the environmental and waste impacts are pretty evident. But I've really reflected, I know we all did for a whole range of different reasons, on our hard rubbish collection last year. And you drive around and you think about how awful it is, the amount of stuff that is thrown out, often stuff that's entirely usable. But again, as a society, how we have to shift our thinking from people going, you know what, that's okay, that we have all this stuff and you can just dump it out there when you think it's at its use by date. So for me, as I've thought about potential benefits of sharing sheds and libraries of things, you could see it potentially flowing on to a reduction in our hard rubbish collection, certainly reduction in landfill and recycling. And we need to be mindful too that we've got now increased density and smaller dwellings, so people's ability to store things is increasingly limited, and we see that often where people are using their garages to store things rather than have their cars in there, and the issues that creates. People who are living in units and apartments, again, just have limited ability to store a whole variety of things. And you do think about the issues with affordability. We know that for the most part, Moonee Valley is an affluent community, but we also know that there are people within our community who are not affluent and who really are at an economic and social disadvantage. So the idea that you might provide people with the opportunities to use things that they otherwise just could not justify buying for a one-off is, to me, really appealing. So there's certainly a range of issues that need to be thought about as part of this, and obviously the venue is a big one, and we're really, one of the great legacies of this council will be this real genuine shift to multi-use of our facilities and getting the ball rolling with that. And again, when I think about multi-use, this is a prime opportunity. We've got a whole range of different facilities that could potentially have a sharing shed located within it. I did have to mention the cave in Ascot Vale, and if you haven't had the chance, pop down. So at the cave, boomerang bags, I'm sure everyone's heard of boomerang bags and probably has a boomerang bag or two. So it's such a fabulous hub that's developed really organically. You've got boomerang bags, there's the little library, there's now plans for a little pantry. There's the repair cafe. I've had a couple of sessions there too. So it's just that type of hub is, I suppose, exists in some way. So it might be that we look at opportunities there. With the library of things, obviously our libraries are one of our most loved facilities in the whole of Moonee Valley, and of all the things that we regularly rate highly on, it's our libraries, and that's totally understandable. And we can think about the things that libraries loan, and certainly we loan books and DVDs and things like that, but there is a real potential for our libraries to borrow or to loan other things to people. And there's existing models for that. So that might be something that can be considered as part of this. The motion is also asking for us to write to the state government, and again, this money that they're sitting on, to provide a funding stream to councils who want to go down this path and really support waste reduction in the first instance. And I'm almost finished, Mayor, just 2 seconds. It's also about, again, looking at this partnership approach, because there are organisations out there. It's not something that you would have to just have council running. There are a range of organisations that could be involved. And certainly we've got lots of wonderful councils nearby who we could potentially partner with in something like this. Obviously City of Melbourne, City of Maribyrnong, other councils too. So I just would really hope we can start shifting our focus around waste, as I've said a number of times tonight, and think about how do we stop this waste being created in the first instance. And to me, this is a very obvious way. And so I hope councillors see fit to support the motion for a report.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Cusack.
Hello, and thank you very much, Councillor Marshall, for bringing this one up. I think it's an idea that is, as you were just pointing out, has taken root in the community already, and very much by our council's job is very much, I think, to add the water and the other bits and pieces that are needed to sustain this, because it will continue to grow and make a lot of sense. Once upon a time, we used to talk about, in terms of leftover things at home, about reduce, reuse, recycle, but now we can add to that repurpose. And Councillor Marshall, you mentioned that in a number of different ways. There are lifestyle changes that people are going through. So we have a number of people who are living singly now in units, apartments and so on like that, who just need a thing to fix up or to add to what they've already got. And they've got no way of doing it. And in particular, I think where, for instance, people like to go and rummage around and find something, they don't quite have it in their mind what it is, but they can maybe describe it broadly, and this is a way to start doing that. It sits so beautifully in our neighbourhood's idea, the whole 2040 thing. It is just anchored in that. So it's about sort of, in one sense, it reminds me of the old bit of graffiti that I used to see once upon a time when I had hair and I was going to uni. It was about smash institutionalised graffiti, which in itself was a play on words. And so this is a bit about institutionalised magpies, in a sense, the people who are picking up the stuff off your curbside. But then again, it has a serious side to it. It does have an aspect around maybe helping a little bit out on that curbside recycling area. And it's about how people can be proactive rather than just waiting to use up their one opportunity to make the phone call to council, or their two opportunities to make their phone calls to council to get stuff picked up. And I think the other part about this is that, and don't miss this, people will be small businesses who are looking to get things going, who just need little things, and you might be repurposing stuff. One of the projects that I was involved in years ago, and I know it still goes, is through the prison system, where you're providing clothing to people so that they can go and get their jobs and things like that, or go for job interviews and stuff like that. This is an opportunity to actually start doing some of that little bit of work on the side through these sorts of initiatives. So it's got a lot of opportunities, a lot of applications. I think that it'd be really, really good for council to think about how it collaborates in this, not to run it by council, not to be the big hand on it. Let this be something organic, let people develop it up a bit, provide some guidance and be a genuine partner in this game, and it really will work. We've already seen the pop-up libraries on the street, up and down the streets. People are just doing it, and we've got them at a couple of the train stations now. So they're working, and that's what people want.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Gatchie-Murchie?
Just briefly to say that I am incredibly excited by this notice of motion. This is something to me that I think speaks to what we can do in terms of the 2040 strategy and what we can do in terms of collaborating with our community to enable them to do the things they do best. Certainly, I am heavily involved with Moonee Valley Mamas and Essendon Good Karma Network, and you see the day-to-day requests that occur on these groups where people just want something once off and then will often offer it back again for free. There's definitely a need out there to have a sharing of resources. So I'm really excited by it and I can't wait till it comes back to us.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. The next item of business is urgent business, and we do not have any, do we have any items of urgent business? No. Do any councillors have anything that they'd like to report on in their roles as delegates? No? So that brings us to the next item of business, which is confidential reports, and there is one confidential report this evening. So councillors, can I have a motion that the meeting be closed to the public under section 89(2)(d) of the Local Government Act 1989 to consider confidential reports? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Seconded, Councillor Cusack. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. So this is where we say goodnight to members of the public gallery and those watching via live stream. Thank you very much for your interest in tonight's meeting, and we shall see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.